Host of the Ben Ferguson Show and co-host of The Verdict with Ted Cruz, Ben Ferguson, and host of Stacy on the Right on Sirius XM Patriot, Stacy Washington. Great to have you both with us. Ben, I want to go ahead and start with you and talk about the anti-Israel protests and the sentiment that we're seeing in this country, because what really amazed me is what we're seeing at Columbia. The students were told they needed to leave by 2 o'clock today. You know what? They're still there. The president has not spoken about this issue at all, condemning the actions that we've seen on campus. And so we've created a slippery slope, and these people are now taking advantage of it.
Yeah, make no mistake, this is organized and it is well funded from the left, including George Soros. You follow this money. This is not going away anytime during this semester. This is going to continue until class is let out. And if you look at the Columbia president, it's very clear actions speak louder than words. Look at what she said just 2 months after 9/11. When she referred to radical extremists that blow up Americans and crash planes into towers it's a form of protest. That's what she said. You have others at Columbia that have said you ought to be thankful and grateful that we're not out there killing Zionists, AKA Jews. Are she going to get rid of any of those students who are saying that? Of course not. But this is also about this election coming up. Democrats understand, including the president, that young people are anti-Israel on the left. They can't stand Israel in general. They don't like Israeli students or people in this country around the world. And they understand that they need this to happen so that they don't alienate 30 and under voters in the United States of America. And that's why you've seen from the top down, from the president of the United States of America to the presidents of these universities, they are staying completely silent, because if they do stand up, then these students won't vote for them in November, and that's how desperate they are to grab votes.
Stacy, they're so desperate that they can't even say, you know what, if you're an anti-Semite on campus, we're not going to give you student loan relief. No, they're still going to hand that out, even to the kids protesting. That says massive desperation to me.
Well, it's desperate, but it also is a perfect picture of where we are in this country right now, where on a college campus, an august campus, historic in nature, and it's an Ivy League elite university where it used to be that if you said you went to Columbia, people would literally stop what they were doing and take notice of that, because it was difficult to get into and the education was top notch and the networking opportunities were unmatched unless you were at another Ivy. But what I'm seeing on this screen, as all of us Americans observe, is that there are no classes in session. There are no people who are able to effectively access the learning that they're paying unbelievable amounts of money to have an opportunity to participate in. This is an expensive school, and families are doing a lot of things that other people maybe aren't considering. Working 2 jobs, they've been saving since their child was a baby. They might be getting money from parents and grandparents. The children might be working over the summer to be able to be at this place. This is a place they're paying to be at that has been taken over by agitators who aren't even students. So as a mom, as a taxpayer, as someone who cares about this country and how we allow people to grow up, these are adults. They should be arrested. The tent should be dismantled and trashed, and schools should be back in session, because the students who pay to be there deserve that.
Let's move on to this. Over the weekend, SNL's Colin Jost cracked a joke about Biden's economy at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Listen.
Like with the economy, the vibes are bad, but the numbers say it's strong. The economy is kind of like you on the steps of Air Force One. It feels like it's stumbling, but there is somehow upward progress.
All right, but Americans don't think it's a laughing matter. A new poll showing that voters in key swing states like Michigan and Wisconsin actually prefer Trump's economy. And Stacy, you're making the point about how much money is being spent on the protests and why it matters to people. The overall economy really matters to people right now. And as a matter of fact, they're looking back and saying, I am not better off under this president than I was under Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. And we see that every time we go to the grocery store, right? You get the tiny double-decker cart, right? This is the cart for when you're going to get 10 items. Instead, you fill both baskets and you come out and you've spent $350 for food for 2 people for 1 week. And you're thinking, what have I done wrong here? I think Colin's joke fell flat because he was speaking to a room full of individuals, most of whom have lost their sense of humor. They don't find it funny because they can't see the satire in pointing out that President Biden can't use the main steps up Air Force One anymore. He's an elderly individual who is really declining before our very eyes. But more than that, because I don't think Americans are really hard-hearted towards an elderly man, whether he's the president or not, it is those statistics that you've shared about how much it costs to buy food and gas and energy, how much people are paying for college, how it's $11,400 more to live the same life you had when you were in the Trump years, only that was 3.5 years ago. You're paying more to live that same lifestyle today, and your pay hasn't kept up with that. So Americans really want someone who's going to pay attention to the things that matter, which are the kitchen table issues. And I know Ben talks about this when he's on his podcast with Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz talks about this when he comes on my show. We are all talking about the same things. This is a universal issue. Even wealthy individuals are looking at how much things cost and making adjustments to the spending that they're doing. So this is a problem for everyone, not just elites or people at the bottom of the rung.
Ben, there's a lot of nostalgia for the Trump economy, but the thing about it is Biden, there's layers of Biden on top of the Trump economy that have to be rolled back if you want to get back to that. Do Americans understand how much has to be undone to get the thing they liked before?
I hope, but I think it's really more simple than that for voters. It goes back to that old saying, it's the economy stupid, right? And the bottom line is, if you've got a family of 4, you're paying about $22,000 to $23,000 more now than you were in 2019 for the same lifestyle you would have had in 2019. It's the economy stupid. And this president saying that Bidenomics is working when it's not working, when rent is up, when the cost of gasoline is up, when food is up, when traveling is through the roof, when airline tickets, a family of 5 now can barely get on the plane for under $2,000 anymore. They're having to look at all of this and they're saying to themselves, I really don't like this. So I said this to somebody the other day when I was speaking at a university. I was like, wouldn't you love to take the trip you took in 2019 and have a few mean tweets to read on the flight during that same time? Because I would totally take that right about now.
And by the way, he wants to let the Trump tax cuts expire. So all those costs that you just mentioned, Ben, they're going to be taking more money from every family. Let me
go to this, Ben, because we've got liberals, including the president, for the life of them. Okay, we're talking about the economy here. Can't figure out Trump's appeal. Listen.
Does it strike you as like, how is it even necessary to have half a president campaigning against the other guy? It is shocking to me that it takes the amount of effort to be competitive against someone who just, in my opinion, is just running for the wrong thing.
Well, a lot's changed, and a lot's changed in how you communicate. A lot's changed in information, and so much disinformation out there. And you know, it's really, and it's hard to communicate even today when you do accomplish some improbable things.
Stacy, there's a lot to unpack there, but why don't we just get your hot take on it?
So I think he did accomplish some pretty unbelievable things. He has had a record number of people, 12 million, come into the country illegally, a record number of children who've been killed by those same illegal aliens, a record number of Americans who are second-guessing every decision they've ever made because they voted for Biden and they know they did wrong there and maybe they've made some other really serious, deleterious decisions. He's got a lot of records under his belt, but I'll just go to the heart of this issue, which is, of course, Jason doesn't understand why someone like me would prefer Trump. I want money in my pocket. I don't care about the tweets, and I actually want someone who puts America first. Jason doesn't have to worry about that because he owns homes around the world and earns $20 million a film. We don't have a lot in common, but we should because he's an American. And in the America we had before Biden, we all had things in common based on that alone. Money didn't matter as it pertained to things we had in common.
Ben, Biden's got it summed up to disinformation. His bestie, Obama, says it's all fear and mass confusion. Listen to this.
Were you surprised that there were
That
60 some
surprised me.
million people that bought it and voted for him and then did it again?
Well, I think that we can't discount the fact that the world's changing quick.
Yeah.
And when the world changes quick, people get scared and they get confused. You have suddenly people feeling as if they're losing manufacturing jobs. Some of the towns that in Illinois where I was representing, Arkansas where Bill was working, you see people starting to feel like they're losing status. Suddenly you've got the internet and social media and people are being flooded with all kinds of stuff and they don't know how to sort it all out.
Yeah.
And when people get scared and concerned, then the appeal of somebody who says, I'm going to make it like it used to be where you don't have to worry about it.
Ben, quick reaction to that one.
Yeah, let's just take a moment and enjoy the fact that this podcast is called Smartless. That's just the perfect place for Joe Biden to go and talk, all right? Like, that's just amazing. Just enjoy that moment that of all the podcasts he could have gone on, he went on Smartless.
Right.
They nailed it at the White House that day. Well, I think there's also just an arrogance, and if you really look at Obama and what his words were there, he's basically saying that Trump supporters, you need to understand they're so stupid that when things change quickly, they can't keep up.
Right.
That's what he was saying in translation. I'm a really smart guy. I understand the economy is bad right now, and I understand it's because of Joe Biden. And I understand it's because of Bidenomics. I understand that you can't spend $1 trillion every 100 days and expect to have a great economy, which is what we're doing right now. And I also will say this. Keep underestimating us, and let's see what happens in November. If you think we're that dumb and stupid, I'll see you at the voting booth in November, and it's going to be a fun day.
Got it. Ben Ferguson, Stacy Washington, great to talk to you.